So without further ado, let me introduce our guest today, Hank Stephenson from Arizona. Hank.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. That was a really kind introduction. Okay, we've got a room full of Democrats here, pretty plugged in Democrats. And I'm curious, who of you can tell me who's the most conservative Democrat in the Arizona House? Just shout it out if you have a thought.
Alma Hernandez.
Alma Hernandez. Good guess. Good guess. Anyone else got something? Most liberal senator, Republican, or most liberal Republican senator? Anyone have a guess?
Liberal Republican. Wow.
Is there one?
How do you know Alma? Like, how do you, what makes you think she's the most conservative Democrat?
Because she's voted with a lot of Republican positions and she's, not well liked in the Tucson area by many people. That's why.
Awesome. Okay. We'll come back to this. But I want to get into a little bit of introduction first. That was a wonderful intro. Thank you so much, Jenny. Appreciate the kind words and especially the appeal to subscribe. Can I share my screen here?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, here we go. I got it now. Okay. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about me, and today we're going to talk about AI in politics and journalism. And I have a, let's call it non-traditional presentation for you. These are my notes. So no slideshow, but I'm going to take you through the tabs I generally have open in a given day. So here we go. As I was working last night putting this together, this is what I asked my chat GPT. I need an Arizona agenda themed image that will serve as a slideshow I'm calling a tour through my tabs of mess of AI, politics, and journalism. Include junk that I like based on what I've generated in the past.
Wow.
This is what my chat GPT comes up with. So a little bit about me. I started my career bouncing around small papers from North Dakota to Nogales. Was a journalism school dropout because I got a job offer, went to U of A, but ended up moving down to Nogales along the Arizona-Mexico border for my very first grown-up job, which was at the Nogales International, where I covered city council, drug smuggling, all sorts of weird little stuff that you're going to cover in a border town like that. Eventually got a job at the Arizona Capital Times. Give me just a second. We're going to have to deal with some technical difficulties on this, I am sure. Started at the Tucson Weekly. My very first article at the Tucson Weekly was about prairie dogs. Decided to dig that one up last night. At the Capital Times, I did a whole lot of kind of geeky stats stuff. I was always, for a non-technical person, always very interested in kind of process minutia, analysis of voting records. This is one story that I was just looking at recently that popped into my head, but this was from, years of just sitting on the Arizona House of Representatives floor. I noticed that there were a handful of Republicans that were always voting no, even on Republican bills. And so this is the kind of stuff I would do back in 2013 when I was working at the Capital Times. And I show you this because this was incredibly labor intensive. I can sit there and spot a trend by just sitting on the House floor and noticing like, oh, Warren Peterson always votes no, along with Steve Montenegro. But to actually get the kind of stats that I needed to tell a story like this, I mean, it was me literally hand tallying votes for years and years. And so besides the kind of geeky stat stuff, I had a great time at the Arizona Capital Times picking on David Gowan, who was the speaker for part of my time while I was the House of Representatives reporter. This was one story that got me kicked out of the Arizona House of Representatives completely for about a week there. David Gowan was super mad that I was just going hard on him for a couple of years. He was running for Congress. He was shady. He was doing all sorts of illegal stuff. This story in particular is about how he had the sergeant at arms who worked for him take out a state car and drive it 4,800 miles, which is farther than you can drive in any one direction in the continental United States. Where was he going? Oh, he was touring CD1 because he was running for Congress there and he was using state resources to do it. He eventually had to pay back $12,000 in inappropriate travel that he had claimed and got reimbursed for. There was an attorney general investigation. And as part of that, the House got really mad at me and started a new background check policy where they said that in order to get press credentials at the Arizona House, you had to undergo a pretty invasive background check that would bar people who had crimes like murder, assault, rape, and the only misdemeanor on the list was disorderly conduct. And I'd gotten in a bar fight in Wickenburg. I was in my early mid-20s at the time, and was charged with disorderly conduct. So they used that as an excuse to kick me out of the House of Representatives. The entire press corps balked. We threw a fit. And a couple days later, they rescinded the policy. It was national news. My bar fight has been written about in the New York Times. You say that? Uh, Jokes on them. It was great for my career. I won a lot of awards those years. And that kind of allowed me later on to have, a little bit of name ID in this very small world that we work in, that allowed me to launch the Arizona Agenda, which is what I do now. It's an independent newsletter, comes out 5 days a week, covers politics, policy, and power in Arizona. Before that, I worked at the Arizona Daily Star for a little while in between the Arizona Capital Times, and then returned to the Capital Times to run the Yellow Sheet Report, which back in the day was a really awesome kind of $300 a month lobbyist insider publication, where I did a whole lot more kind of geeky stat stuff, just kind of really insider minutia about voting records and kind of breaking down, different legislative stats. I loved that job. I would have stayed there forever, except for we were bought out by, I think, 5 different companies while I worked there over the course of almost 8 non-consecutive years. Each one was worse than the last. Private equity firms that just wanted to squeeze the paper dry because it was profitable. So rather than investing in it, all they ever wanted to do was cut, cut, cut. I remember I went to them one time and told them I had increased the revenue subscription to the Yellow Sheet $80,000 that year and showed them the data and said, look, this is a place that runs on institutional knowledge. We have some great reporters here. I can't do this job without them. We have to kick them like $2,000 raises so that they don't quit this year. We haven't given them raises in years. Management literally laughed at me and said, that's not how this works. So that's a big reason why I quit corporate journalism and decided to go independent and try to launch the agenda. We did this in 2021 when Substack was just becoming a thing. And I got a call from an old colleague of mine who was a former Cap Times reporter who was working at the Republic at that time. And she said, have you ever heard of Substack? And I said, no. And she said, well, they're trying to launch a whole bunch of local news publications. And I said, that sounds great. You should do it. And she said, no, you should do it. I said, that sounds like a lot of work. So I dragged her into it. Rachel Gang was my original partner. She's since moved on. She's working for The Guardian, living in the upper Midwest with her new family near her parents and all her siblings and stuff. So she's very happy. But when she left, I kind of had a decision of like, what do I want to do with the agenda? It was at a point by then that it was successful enough that I could probably just keep doing it by myself forever or, for the foreseeable future. and earn more money than I had ever been paid in journalism, and just kind of keep it as it was, small, scrappy. Or I could try to start building kind of what I've had in my head for a long time, a vision for a broader news organization. So after she left, we launched the Tucson Agenda, which is a daily publication that covers politics and policy down in Tucson and southern Arizona. We've got a couple of great reporters who are just honed in on City Hall and the County Board of Supervisors and, the meat and potatoes of local government reporting down there. And we've also we launched last year a couple of weekly verticals, one on education, one on water, and one on artificial intelligence. And in that time, we started building Skywolf, which is our legislative intelligence service. And I'll show you guys this. But that I built partly because I thought that, it might be able to generate enough revenue to support the journalism side, and partly just because I wanted it to exist. This was my way to get at all these kind of geeky stats that I love writing about, that I think really illuminate trend stories and tell you things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to put, your finger on, but maybe can feel, like who's the most liberal Republican in the Arizona Senate, or most conservative Democrat in the Arizona House. And so with that, I want to show you something. Skywolf is our legislative bill tracking service. And part of what we've done with Skywolf is create what's called an MCP. And an MCP is basically, you know what a USB-C is? How you charge your iPhone nowadays? Remember before USB-Cs, there were 1,000 different chargers, and now everything seems to come with a USB-C. That was the industry essentially saying we can't have all these charging different types of chargers. We need to consolidate on one type of charger. The AI industry has done that with talking to data. So what an MCP is a way of structuring your data and connecting to a large language model like Claude or Google Gemini or ChatGPT. And so my ChatGPT is smarter than yours. This is my Claude, but my Claude is smarter than yours because it's plugged into not just Skywolf, but everything I do. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what that looks like today, because I think it'll be helpful to understand the capabilities of AI and how people in politics, journalism are using AI today. And I don't think it's the way that most people who don't actively use AI think that it is. So based on voting records, can you guys see this screen?
Not much.
Can you this?
Not enough. Make it larger if you can.
Jenny will make it larger. I can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna be just going through a whole bunch of tabs here. So if we can get that as the main screen up here, I think it'll be helpful.
That's better.
But
Yes, it's good.
based on voting records, who's the most conservative Democrat in the Arizona House? And so what this does, I slash Skywolf, so it knows I'll load the Skywolf MCP tool first and then dig into the voting records. And I won't bore you with the entire thing here. But you can kind of see how it thinks, which is my favorite thing about using like Claude and other AI tools, is like, if the logic of this is correct, and this is, you can see, like, I don't know how to read code. I'm not a technical person, but just through brute force, I figured out, kind of some basics that allow me to check the work of this AI. And so I can go through all that and see what it's doing. And it gives me like its framework for how it's thinking about, how do I even define what is the most conservative Democrat? What does that mean? That's kind of why I asked at the beginning, like, how do you know that? And so you can see I've got my first 9 data points, blah, blah, blah. I'll just take you down to, what did it come up with? Consuelo Hernandez, sister to Alma Hernandez, followed by Lydia Hernandez, Myron Sosi. And these, I know just from watching these people, yeah, these are the most conservative Democrats in the Arizona House. But I really like the kind of, additional insight that it gives me when I'm like playing with this stuff, because I think this actually tells you a lot about how AI thinks. And it's pretty impressive. Like one asterisk, Seth Blackman only voted on 191 bills as opposed to 600 for most. He
Wow.
missed a ton of this session. He was gone. He basically announced that he wasn't going to run for retire or re-election, and he just stopped showing up. I remember sitting on the House floor and being like, "Where is this guy?" And he showed up on like the final day of session. I was like, "Oh, he came back. Look at him." So like it's able to tell that just because it's looking at every vote that the House took, which is, part of the data we take into Skywolf, and noticing like, "Oh, this guy's way off." Everyone else voted 3 times as many times as he did. So, it gives me this short list, and I start thinking like, oh, that's interesting. Both the Hernandez sisters are on that. What if Consuelo and Alma disagreed on? And so it can go in there and tell me exactly, what each of them voted yes versus no on, where they disagreed. At another point, I plugged this into, I had an old campaign finance database on my desktop, and I fed it to my Claude, was asking the same series of questions. And I said, what do you notice? And it said, oh, yeah, a lot of her breaking with the caucus is in the healthcare industry, and she gets a whole lot of money from the healthcare industry. I was like, that's right, Claude. So it can kind of insights that, maybe I know from just sitting around for so long, but you can't just say something without backing it up. So this is doing the kind of analysis that would take me days and days to do by hand, can be done in, I mean, I remember the first time I started playing with this, I was eating Taco Bell and I ate 6 tacos, and it turned out this huge report in that amount of time on voting records from the Arizona House and Senate. And like I said, I think people have a lot of problems with AI because they don't know if it's correct or not. But the more data you give it, one thing it's really good at is parsing data. So I've never to this day found an error in this where it wasn't a logic error. If it knows what it's doing, if you give it a proper prompt and it knows which data sources you want it to pull specifically, then it's a lot like a calculator. This is not hallucinating things like just asking ChatGPT who was the 23rd president. Maybe it knows that, maybe it screws it up. But this is pretty mathematical, the way that it's running algorithms to check this data and compile and analyze this data. So, at least in my experience, if it knows what it's doing, it gives you a right answer. And so this is the thing that like excites me most right now. And I do want to show you, I asked liberal Republican state senator, and blah, blah, blah. I keep this on the verbose mode so that I can see its thinking. Most people won't see this. Transcript view, normal. So this is what it normally looks like, but you can kind of go back and see its logic. And so who's the most liberal Republican senator? Well, Vince Leach. And you'll notice that Jake Hoffman is actually like pretty high up here in breaking from Peterson, which is one of the metrics that it's using to decide what liberal Republican means. But then, where is this? I wanted to show you. There's something, basically it came in here and says, he breaks a lot, but that actually doesn't, he's breaking right from the caucus. He's not breaking with Democrats. So it knew to separate him out. There's a line somewhere in all this text where it says like, biggest defector, most hardcore Republican about Jake Hoffman, which is like interesting to me that it not only knows, that like it can kind of actually add some context to this data where it knows not only like we're just not looking at who broke from the majority leader, but in what direction did they break? And then, so I thought this was really interesting too, just about like it says, if you want the most liberal Republican label, everyone hangs on Shope. And I said, well, that's interesting. How did you know Shope was the conventional pick? And at first it got kind of defensive and said like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, And then I said, no, you're not wrong for what it's worth. I'm just wondering how you know that. This is actually like a pretty interesting sentence or two that tells you a lot about AI. And in case you can't read this, I'll do the abbreviated version. The same way you know it, mechanically, by reading years of Arizona political coverage, except I read it all at once during training and I can't remember where any specific piece came from. More concretely, I'm trained on a large corpus, blah, 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 which includes a lot of capital journalism, the Republic, Capital Times, ABC Mirror, Axios, National Wire coverage, Ballotpedia, and quite plausibly the Arizona agenda itself. I don't know why we got a quite plausibly tag on there, but so I think that actually tells you quite a bit about like how this stuff works real generally. And so that's kind of, that's part of why my AI can do stuff that yours can't, is because it has a whole lot of context that I've added to it. Part of it is the Skywolf MCP, and part of it is other things that I've attached. We'll get into this, but I think you can see on my sideboard here, I always keep my Obsidian open, and this is basically my second brain. This is everything I know. This is, I mean, well, I'll show you a little bits and pieces of it, but this is controlling my life at this point. This is me dumping every bit of kind of tribal knowledge, the things that we don't usually write down, into a place, connecting it to my Claude. So when I ask questions, it has context to answer it appropriate to me.
Can you make it bigger?
Yes, I will in a little bit. I'm going to do a whole little like short section on that. But first, I want to just show you a little bit more about Skywolf. So Skywolf is a legislative bill tracking service, legislative intelligence service that I started building with some people that I met about 3 years ago. And its main function is to allow people who track the legislature for a living to actually track the legislature. Like a lot of these lobbying firms or government agencies that have to go down there and protect their interest at the Capitol, like would literally be building spreadsheets and updating them every day just to know this year we had, a record number of bills, more than 2,000 bills posted this year, which we've never had that many before. So it is darn hard to keep track of this stuff. I mean, I've done this professionally for most of my adult life, and without some sort of system, I would never know what's happening up there. So main functions, it's got a lot of different pieces to it, but main functions are it serves as a calendar for everything happening at the Capitol. You can search through bills. I think that's what I have open here. This is every bill. Oh, this is filtered to every bill that was vetoed by the governor. A couple of different bills, views for how you want to see that. These summaries that we do are generated by AI and then checked by a human who has been doing this for almost 20 years, just summarizing legislation. And our model is getting better and better because we've run so many summaries through this. And then we've corrected those summaries by a human. And then we explain to the AI why we made those corrections. So the next time it's a little bit better. The next time it's a little bit better. The next time it's a little bit better. Beyond, just basically being able to read about all the bills in the Arizona legislature and be able to see, the history of the bills, the documents of the bills, the sponsors, any notes you want to leave on this bill, where it showed up on the calendar. You can write your own summary. We can see the request to speak system, who signed in support and opposed. Stuff like that. It also has just kind of more, I guess, institutional knowledge. So for example, I can look at every committee individually, see who the chairman of the committee is, when it meets, where it meets. And then I can go into individual committee page. I can see who the committee staff is on that stuff. I can see who the members are. I can email the members directly from here. And I can see every bill that has gone to that committee. And so like this is something that's interesting because like I do, one of the stats that I've invented while I was working at the Capital Times was the gatekeeper score, which is like of all the bills, this committee had 278 bills assigned to it. How many of them did they actually hear? Because the committee chairmanships have this enormous power to just kill bills by not hearing them. So who wields that power heavily? Who, is a little bit more loose on, I'll let a couple Democrat bills go through. These kind of stats allow me to do that. And that's something that, 15 years ago, I was doing literally by hand or at best into a spreadsheet. And it would be a multi-day process to get this. Now I can essentially ask my Claude and just explain, exactly what, a gatekeeper score means. And it has connection to this data. It can run this data and say, okay, yeah, so you're looking for anything that passed the committee of the whole, anything that got chaptered, just kind of setting those parameters of, if it was vetoed, then yeah, it got through this committee. So that's one of the cool things about having this data set and then also having it connected to a super brain is I can do the kinds of things I used to do just way faster. Also, lawmakers, every lawmaker, all their contact information, their committee assistance is in here. Within the lawmaker, you get a little map, all the bills that, wow, she only sponsored 3 bills all year. That's interesting. All the bills that they sponsored. And then, I can do a batting average from this. I can say of, the 3 bills she sponsored, how many were signed into law? Oh, none of them even got a committee hearing. Okay. Her batting average is 0. And that's not untypical for Democrats. We have transcripts of every committee hearing. And one of the things we've been working on this summer is attaching speaker labels to them. So each transcript, we're doing the old ones in batches, but going forward, each transcript will have, Steve Montenegro and then his block of text, and like literally tagging the name to each person, to each bill, which will just keep making our database smarter and smarter. If we have access to analyze, everything Warren Peterson has ever said on gun bills, gun restrictions, you might be able to see a pattern. You might be able to see a way to talk to him in a way that breaks through to him. Like there's a lot of value in being able to take this massive, unwritten down amount of knowledge and be able to use it to influence policy. So we also have whip sheets where you can kind of go in there and say, I think John Kavanaugh is going to vote against this and start kind of like building out, where do I think this vote is going? Tracking lists. So like one of the main functions of this whole thing is tracking lists, is like the ability to say, look, we've got 154 education bills that I'm following. Like, how am I going to do that? I'm going to have to actually like group them together. And then, so this was my one of my random education tracking lists. So I can see where every bill that relates to education is at any given step in the process because of this. And I can get alerts based on that. Is this going up for a vote today? Shoot, I didn't plan that in the editorial calendar. Better make some space. Get alerts after the fact about, this bill died. And then from there, like basically you take your tracking list and you can create a report. Let me just pull up a random report here. My internet has been moving slow. Where you can, basically see, okay, these are the bills on my tracking list. Where do they stand? I could add more notes into here so that I, remember what I talked to a lawmaker about, or we've done it where we just dump old news articles in there so that we have a little bit of context as we're going through this stuff. But in it, and there's, some extra bells and whistles, but in a nutshell, that's what we're doing with Skywolf, is trying to make this mess of data usable to an average person, or at least an average political nerd. And so since we started building Skywolf, it has been, oh, sorry, give me just a second. Oh, so this is Skywolf and a couple of other things that we've done around Skywolf with artificial intelligence. For example, More bloodshed at the Republic. So about a year ago, yeah, hey, a year ago, just about now, the Republic laid off its entire editorial board, or gave buyouts to its entire editorial board, but they no longer have an editorial board. They don't have columnists. They have, Stephen Richer writes a column there, or letters to the editor, but no more, Abe Kwok, for example, or no more Lori Roberts, or, all those people you loved reading. Among the people who were laid off at that point was Abe Kwok, who was a kind of veteran columnist at the Republic. But he got fired and he was on medical leave. I mean, the guy had cancer really bad. And, so I found out about this, and we were on vacation at the time, and started writing on it and thought, this is a good excuse to use our campaigning tool that we've created, which is called Wolfpack. And so what I did was we used our grassroots advocacy tool, Wolfpack, to spin up a letter writing campaign to Gannett CEO Mike Reed. Our readers sent more than 600 emails to the CEO of Gannett because of this. Because basically, in order to send an email, I mean, you'd have to sit there and, how long does it take you to write a thoughtful email? It takes me like 45 minutes, and I do this for a living. But what we can do instead is essentially I enter some data in the back end, and then allow people to kind of, the basics. Abe Kwok got laid off, blah, blah, blah. We don't like this. And then allow people to kind of customize it and say, okay, what's my specific, why does this bother me? I pay for the Republic and I'm furious you'd treat a longtime reporter that way. I'm a union member, I had cancer too, or something. And then you click generate email. And I turned this campaign off months and months ago, so I won't show you a live one. But basically what it does is this. It creates a custom email that you can send to, in this case, I put in Mike Reed's email in the back end. And it takes, the context that I initially uploaded, Abe Kwok got fired, plus my individual kind of talking points that I pay for the Republic and I'm pissed about this. And it writes a unique email that says some version of that. And then you can regenerate it, you can edit it yourself, whatever, make it more personal if you don't like it. But it has just taken what could be, a daunting task for somebody who is annoyed by this or who wants to, support or oppose legislation at the Capitol, and made it super easy for them to weigh in. And so, without this, if I had asked people to write an email to the Gannett CEO, do you think 600 people would have taken the time to do that? Hell no. But if it's a couple of clicks and they can get something that, more or less reflects what they think about this situation, they're much more likely to do it. So this is one of the other cool things we've been playing with AI. It's just the ability to, get people involved in the political process and make it not so daunting for them. You can use Wolfpack. It's also tied into the Skywolf database. So it knows the summary, the history of every bill. So it's really easy to spin up a letter writing campaign about any individual bill. And then what's next? Oh, other ways that we've used AI. I guess I've ruined the joke, and also this altered and synthetic content that YouTube eventually slapped on this video kind of gives away the whole thing. But a couple of years ago, when deep fake technology was just becoming a thing, we did this. Hey, agenda readers, we have a very special announcement. Carrie Lake offered to film a testimonial about how much she likes the Arizona agenda. She threatened to sue us over this.
Lake, subscribe to the Arizona Agenda for hard-hitting real news and a preview of the terrifying artificial intelligence coming your way in the next election. Like this video, which is an AI deepfake the Arizona Agenda made to show you just how good this technology is getting. Did you realize this video is fake? Well,
you get the point. We got a cease and desist letter from Carrie Lake on this. But I thought, not only did we do it as just a funny joke, but it kind of gave us an excuse to talk about deepfake technology. So like a lot of people, I like this quote that I threw in here. A lot of people basically responded with some variation of a famous line from Jurassic Park. your scientists were so concerned with whether they could, they didn't ask to stop whether they should. Like a lot of people thought we shouldn't be making deep fakes of politicians. And I mean, now politicians are making deep fakes of politicians and paying,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars to put them on television. So like my goal with this is to teach people how to spot that stuff. And as we know, they're already out there. So how can you spot it? We kind of explained that. What else is coming? This was, before AI video generation got so, I guess, like prolific. And then like how do you fight back? What can you do about this? How do you become a smarter consumer? So like we kind of do a lot of gags like this that are, just like making a spectacle, but for a good cause. Or at least I like to tell myself that. Um, is ChatGPT running for office? So like being in this world means that I have gotten really good at spotting AI writing. I can tell. I can, 99% tell just by reading something, whether it's AI or human written. And we used a lot of AI image generation, our art intern ChatGPT, as we called it, for several years. But the novelty kind of wore off. So we've stopped doing that more. And it also like a lot of people were upset that we were doing this. They're like, why don't you hire an artist? I'm like, I put out 2 daily newsletters. There is no artist on earth that can keep up with the speed that we're going. This is me idiot prompting AI being like, no, I want this. No, that was a bad idea. I want this. Like if I did that to a human, they would kill me. An aside, but this was about a congressional candidate last election cycle. Look at this text. This was on his campaign website. I mean, I can't even read that stuff out loud. I don't know what this is. It's a blob of words vomited up by clearly not a human. And so like I ran it through a bunch of different AI detectors. I didn't need to, but 97%, 99.9%, 100% vehemently denied using AI. They were lying. Like, do you think I'm an idiot, people? But so that's one where I think people want to know that their politicians are, using AI to do the job that you would expect your human politician to be able to come up with a policy position on their own, not have to turn to ChatGPT for that. I think that's bad. Here's a more nuanced example though. Walt Blackman. So, constituent wrote to Walt Blackman. Funny story on how I heard about this. Constituent wrote to Walt Blackman saying, "My, autistic daughter needs this funding from this program that had been cut a couple of years ago." She wrote to the entire legislature. Walt Blackman was the only lawmaker who wrote back. He wrote back right away, and she was like, "Well, God, some of these politicians are okay, aren't they?" I think you know where this is going, right? Now, depending on how plugged in you are to the nexus of Arizona politics and artificial intelligence, you might know where this story is headed. Walt Blackman uses ChatGPT on everything. I spotted on his LinkedIn, on his Twitter. I mean, it's just so obvious, not to mention there are an awful lot of emojis in his Twitter feed for, like a relatively old dude. So we called the constituent back. Another lawmaker had seen this email because when Blackman wrote back, he CC'd everyone. And the other lawmaker was like, this looks like AI, Hank. And I was like, oh yeah, that's totally AI. So I called the constituent back who he had written to and was like, did you know he used ChatGPT to respond to your email? She was livid. She went from thinking like, well, Blackman's a pretty good guy. He was the only lawmaker who got back to me to being like, that guy used GPT. Did he even read my message? Or is this just some automated crap he does? And that really changed her opinion of him. So I called Blackman. I called Blackman and he said, he's an Army veteran. He's got a traumatic brain injury. I've known this about him for a long time. He's not, it's not something he keeps secret. He talks about it. And he made a pretty compelling case for look, man, I have, a disability and this helps me organize my thoughts. This helps me respond to the overwhelming amount of email I get from constituents. This is a good tool for me. And so I don't know. You know, like what do you guys think about that? Should he be allowed to respond? He says he reads all the emails before he generates a prompt back to them. You know, he says he edits the prompts. I don't know, or edits, the output. I don't know if that's true. He's definitely using AI. I don't know how I feel about this exactly. You know, like the congressional candidate just slapping up a website full of like gobbledygook policy positions. I feel pretty strongly one way about that. But a lawmaker using this as a tool to empower him to get over the fact that he has a traumatic brain injury from military service and also no staff at the legislature, that's a bit more nuanced. So that's kind of what we've done with, just picking on politicians who are using AI. So we've incorporated, I mean, we are a pretty AI forward news organization. But as you'll see, that doesn't mean that like we're just sitting here prompting news stories. Can AI do journalism? This was something we wrote about a couple of years ago where we did try to have AI just prompt news stories. Spoiler alert, they were trash. Like you can't have AI write an actual local news story that requires actual reporting. Could it write a decent summary of, the day's news? Sure. Yeah, it can do that. But even, we have an in other news section in the agenda where it's just kind of rounding up the political news from other publications that, a political junkie should be reading on a given day. I can't get ChatGPT to do that. It doesn't have the context that I have in my head. It doesn't know the, 20-year history of John Kavanaugh and why this thing is really funny or why this is outrageous or why this is stupid or, be able to point back to the time in 2009 where he did the exact same thing or whatever. Like humans are adding value to this process that is beyond just simple summary. It can crank out summaries, but they're not worth printing. And that's what we found out through some of these, experiments we've done with AI. And, whenever we've done that, we label it clearly AI. We tell our readers, we're doing this because we're super interested in AI and we want to see how long until it takes our job. But as for this, Audie is our co-founder at at Skywolf. Audie is a developer, just a tech nerd, a AI optimist at heart. One of the smartest, most interesting people I've ever met in my life. And we got him, occasionally writing for the agenda just on AI stuff. And I loved it so much that we launched an AI agenda, a weekly publication just talking about AI policy in Arizona nationally. How is the world, the government, the political economy dealing with this wild new technology that we've got on our hands? Some of the things we wrote about in there were, at the Arizona legislature created an AI committee, and what do they hope to do with that? The funny thing is, like, these people have no idea like what AI is. Even the most like AI forward lawmaker is not equipped to regulate artificial intelligence in any way, shape, or form. It is mind blowing how ignorant these people are of, you know, perhaps the most valuable, revolutionary, threatening technology humankind has ever come up with, at least since electricity. Got into the world of crypto through this, Kirsten Sinema, Wendy Rogers, Mark Fincham, Donald Trump, they all love crypto. What up with that? How local governments are using AI. This was about Tucson, where they were using AI to try to find leaks in the city pipes, which fascinating stuff, weirdly. Just about how much money is spent on trying to fix pipes. They don't even know when pipes are broken until we've lost so much water. It's such a waste. So they're trying to use AI to fix that problem at a local level. Chat GP teachers. I think the title explains it all, like what's happening with AI in education these days. And then just weird stuff where it's like, this woman is not a real person. She's an actress who is, I mean, I could show you these videos. It is mind blowing how this deep fake stuff has gotten. And like, what is Hollywood doing about this? Like the Actors Guild, like they are freaked out by the idea that like whole movies can just be generated at this point. And like, what are we as a society doing about this? And then RIP internet was, I mean, actually, this explains it all. This is what the internet looks like right now. Isn't that wild? And then there was another one I liked down here too. Just another embed in this. OpenAI says hundreds of thousands of ChatGPT users may show signs of manic or psychosis crisis every week. Yep. So like this is what we got to do through the AI agenda. And it was really fun. But the project, we had launched 3 weekly verticals on top of the 10 editions we do through the Arizona agenda and Tucson agenda. And as we mentioned at the top, like the agenda is doing the clean elections debates this year, which is just this massive, massive undertaking. So we ended up killing off these 3 verticals for the time being, just so that we could focus on the clean election stuff. But this, I mean, just, most of this Audie wrote, and I just edited, but the act of editing Audie, who is just an amazing person, really, really taught me a lot about AI and how it works and what it means for our society. And it forced me to think like really deeply about, what it means for journalism, how we should be using it as a journalist organization, what we can, should, shouldn't, can't do with this stuff. Yeah, and eventually we killed that. I just couldn't afford to hire a new editor to keep these things alive, which is what we would have had to do. Well, the water agenda was awesome. The education agenda. We did these 3 weeklies that were just kind of like the agenda, but just focused on one topic. Of the 3, I mean, I loved doing the AI agenda because ever since I got involved with the Skywolf world, this has just been, to me, the most interesting thing that is happening on Earth. And it's really changed, like I mentioned a few times, I am not technical. I can't read code. I can't write code. I don't like computers. I don't know what a terminal is. Like everything I know about AI, I've learned in the last, 2 or 3 years. And I've learned it by just hanging out with a lot of developers who we've got working on the Skywolf project. And it's really changed the way that I think about AI. And I hear a lot of journalists talking about AI as just, a plagiarism machine that, is like destroying our work or whatever. They just have really negative views on it. And I think a lot of them haven't honestly engaged with AI beyond just like AI, who won the 2020 election, or like whatever, like kind of chat prompting. And yeah, chat prompting is cool. It's amazing. It can, turn up, it knows the entire, knowledge base to some degree of the humankind and can spit out answers that are usually more or less correct, but have a lot of pitfalls to them. But I don't think that's the way that we should be using AI. I think that some of the things that we're doing at the agenda might show a way forward that is actually far more helpful, useful for humanity than simply like burning our water to ask dumb questions. And so I want to show you a little bit about how we use AI at the agenda. I mentioned that I showed you on the side of the screen my Obsidian, and I mentioned that my AI is smarter than yours. And that's not like, it's not smarter on everything. They all know the same amount of knowledge generally, but mine knows a lot about me and the things that I'm super interested in. And part of the reason it knows that is because I do world building. This is an application called Notion, and it's just basically a workflow tool where I store everything for the agenda. This is our like main page, and you can see like editorial calendar, Ion collection. Ion is in other news, story ideas, source list. These are the news organizations that we look at every morning. There's 100 something of them. We open all those tabs every day. Events, calendars, like basically everything you need to run a little newsroom. I'm just going to show you a couple of like how we use this. So our editorial calendar is empty because we fill that out on Fridays. But like this is our editorial calendar. This is where everyone works. And within here, we go into these and have little templates that tell you like, how do you write a header for the Arizona agenda? And then has little spaces to write the headers, the headlines, the subheads, the socials. the top of the email, the in other news section, the widgets that we have in there, the what we're laughing at section. Just, this is our home. This is our home base. And that's, just a database, nothing too special about that. But this is every time we read a news story, let me just go back here. So I have a little shortcut on my desktop. I hit Shift Command R, and it tells me save this page. I'll save it to the Ion Collections bucket, and you will see RIP Internet just showed up here. So as my team is reading the news over a given day, they log things. They just, instead of leaving these tabs open forever, they click Command Shift R and log it into this database. AI goes through and writes a little summary for us. It tells us the link. It tells us when we logged it, gives us the headline. It says, were there any bills mentioned? If so, we should move this to Skywolf because we're building that brain too. Shows us the date it was published, the source, all sorts of different junk that we just like tagged to it so that we have a way to organize this. And so every day everyone reads the news, and as they're reading the news, they log it here. And then kind of towards the end of the day, somebody goes in here and says, okay, what do we got in the news today? And this becomes the in other news. And you'll notice like, this is not what we had write about this. I don't know what this says, but it's, kind of looks like AI slop. It's just a bunch of little words smashed together. But it allows me to say like, do I care? No, I don't care about this. Do I care about this? And then I have to go in there, I have to read the story, I have to kind of hone in on, okay, what's the most interesting thing about this? How would the agenda write about this? What's some background context we can throw in here? Is there a funny footnote that I can put on this, based on, my years at the legislature, just some, backstory of this whole thing. But without this, I mean, you may be able to tell by the speed at which I'm talking, but I have attention deficit disorder, I'm pretty sure. That's what my teachers always told me. I am not an organized person. And I think that's what I really like about AI, is it allows me to take stuff like this
Yes.
and turn it into stuff like this, which is really, really helpful when you're, doing everything that I'm trying to do in a given day. So yeah, I won't show you everything in here because it's actually like, if I get into this stuff, it's very personal, and like trade secrets and things I don't want to be on a Zoom recording. But basically we have, 6 buckets that our system runs off of. And then 3 buckets that our business runs off of. Tasks and projects. Let's look ahead beyond tomorrow. Story ideas. That thing that I thought about at midnight that I didn't want to, I can't write it on napkins anymore. Just a place to put it. Editorial calendar, records request, event calendar, Ion collections, and then, stuff to just kind of keep the business on track. So that's my Notion. And I mentioned MCPs. My Claude is connected to my Notion. So I can ask my Claude, hey, I even record most of my meetings, and I can say, hey, I had a meeting a week ago, Tuesday. Curtis said something about this. Can you go find it? And rather than like me looking through, scrap notes like I showed you here or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, I see that meeting. Did you mean this? Here's the transcript of that meeting. Amazing. So helpful for me. And that's, back to like why my AI is smart is because I give it a lot of context. And then on top of that, my Notion is connected via an MCP, which I told you Skywolf is built. My Gmail is connected via an MCP. My calendar is connected via an MCP. My Slack is connected. Every morning I have a system that goes through and reads probably 8 different things like that. My calendar, my Slack, my emails, the editorial calendar, everything in Notion that I tell it to read. And it writes me a report and it texts me at 7 o'clock every morning. Here's what's on your plate today, and it's like a 7-piece thing. Like in your email, you have 3 criticals, a whole bunch of trash. Respond to those 3 criticals. You've got a meeting at 10 o'clock. Don't forget, you better prepare this time. Blah, 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 blah. And that's great. I mean, that's amazing. It just, what I used to open 20 tabs for comes in a text message. It's awesome. And so the next thing I want to show you is my Obsidian. This is the coolest new thing that I am playing with for the last 6 months or so. And like basically, this is all amounting to knowledge management. Audie, who wrote the AI agenda, actually has gotten stir crazy since we ended the AI agenda. And knowledge management is his whole world. And he just started a new newsletter just talking about knowledge management. And this is something that Audie made me do is learn Obsidian, which is essentially a wiki of my tribal knowledge of the things that, like it doesn't say, it says the things that only I know. So like, let me just, Agendaverse. So voice guide, like how do we write in the agenda? Our goals as a company, things about ion collection, our business models, the 5 C's of the Agendaverse, which is like clear, creative, candid, blah, blah, blah. Active stories. And each of these has a little bit about them. And so one of the things I've been working on is like, I'm a pretty good editor, like big picture editor. I'm a terrible copy editor. Like line item copy, like is this comma go here or there? And hold on just a second, make sure I'm not going too far off task here. Yes, okay. Terrible copy editor. And this lets me, like the fact that I have created a copy edit skill. This is after I do 3 passes on every email. I do kind of a big picture pass, a kind of tinkering pass, and then a final like line edit, like comma level pass. And then, it's 7 o'clock and I'm super tired and I can't read anything anymore. And I can't sleep at night because I don't know if the email is going to have a typo in the morning. Like I had an intern last night hit me up at about 11:30 and was like, I just got out of bed and I had to check this fact. I found 2 things that are wrong in my story. And that's how you know it's a good intern. And I'm like that, like, and so every day after I send the test of the email now, I've started running this copy edit skill against the actual like email in the 10 hours between the time it's done and it actually ships at 6 a.m. And so this is like the agendas style book. Like you've probably heard of the AP style. Every news organization basically adheres to AP style and then has their own internal style book that says like, we do this, we don't do this. So this is our style book. I had this written, just in a Google Doc 5 years ago, some version of it, just so I can remember decisions we've made, so it can stay consistent. This is great. This is something that it does incredibly well. And the very first thing in here is never rewrite, because its tendency is like, oh, I can do this for you. I'm your helpful intern. I'm like, no, I don't want your trash. I just want you to tell me about the commas or the misspelled names or whatever, these little things. So after the email is done every day, I've started running this, and it's getting better and better as I teach it more and more. But essentially I have 3 things is like clear mechanical error, is this like just awkward? Is it just like bad writing? And then like, does it adhere to the agenda style more or less? And doesn't rewrite anything. It just gives me a report and says like, here are the 25 things I caught in today's email. And it is amazing. I mean, I will go through the email 3 times. Kurt will go through the email and he's a better copy editor than me. I've never run this thing where it did not catch at least one thing where I'm glad that it was catching it, and there's only so much we can do as a small news organization. We are a very small news organization, and this empowers us in a lot of ways to do better work than we would have otherwise. And I think like, it's kind of like if I had Google and everyone else was still going to the library, and I understand that there are benefits of going to the library, and that option is still open to me. But now I have Google, and it like, or spell check, or like any of these tools that kind of seemed revolutionary when they came out. I think that's where we are with a lot of AI right now. Yeah, so I mean, especially I'm a reporter, an editor, a publisher, a tech CEO of sorts, with a tiny staff. And this allows, I think, me to do more than I would have been able to otherwise. This gives the agenda some sort of a competitive advantage. And as you've seen, like none of this is like probably what you think of when you hear AI in journalism, which is like some AI just writing like slop for journalism and like putting an ad on it and trying to monetize it via clicks or whatever. Like the first rule is never rewrite, you know, like that is not how we use AI, but we use it in a million different ways that are super helpful to the agenda. And I think there's something I heard a long time ago about uh, the right person to build an accounting software is probably not a developer. It's an accountant. And I think that's I think about that a lot because I think, I'm a person who doesn't understand code, doesn't understand technology, but technology has gotten to a point that with just a little investment in my time, I can actually build things. I'm a builder by nature. I've always liked building things. And AI allows me to do that stuff and build tools for people like me that empower citizens to track their government, that empower a small staff of reporters to do more than they would have been able to otherwise without compromising on, quality and our values. Um, yeah, I think that's about where I wanted to. Oh, the obsidian. Okay, I got a little bit. Oh, no, no. Okay, we went through the obsidian. There is one thing I want to show you because it's super cool. Just this thing populating itself. That's it. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. I got through that in a little bit more than an hour. That was longer than I meant to. I apologize. Oh, last section here, which is the very first section too, which is like, we are a tiny staff of all reporters who came from, the major news outlets in Arizona, who either got laid off or just couldn't handle it anymore, who are trying to do this because we think it's valuable. We think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And we don't have a marketing department. We don't we don't have a lot of things that could help us grow. So please, subscribe. You can subscribe for free. If you decide you like what we do, then consider upgrading to a paid subscription. If you don't like it, you can just click unsubscribe. But give the agenda a shot. If you follow Tucson politics, go subscribe to the Tucson agenda as well. And that is the end of my spiel.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Hank. We really appreciate your time. And for a non-tech person, yeah, you're doing pretty well, especially an ADD one. Shelley, can we see Hank full screen? Oh, there we go. Do you have time for a couple of questions?
Yeah, I got a 22 minutes before I gotta get to my editorial meeting. So I was hoping to wrap up because usually, I think this actually, the more interesting part of this than listening to me rant and show you my tabs. Oh, wait, speaking of show you my tabs. We've got a closing tab for this whole thing. This is share. This is make me a slide like this cover slide, but for the end of my presentation, which is every tab I have open on my screen right now. The end. Okay.
Okay, is it gonna do it? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Love that.
That's great.
Love it.
What did you guys think? What questions about AI, questions about politics? What do you want to talk about?
Your brain.
Yeah.
Tired.
Okay, Ben has a question. Ben has a question, and then Sandy Zalecki, who is running for the state legislature here in LD1. So Ben, do you want to go first, and then Sandy?
So how do you make your money? I mean, to pay your staff and everything, is it all through subscriptions? And who subscribes to your agenda? Like, yeah.
90, I mean, for years and years, our literally only revenue was subscriptions. And we don't paywall anything, which is absolutely insane. We put out everything for free and we beg effectively. Generally, newsletters are lucky to get what they call it, a conversion rate, free to paid subscribers. Newsletters are generally lucky to get a conversion rate of 3%. We, for a long time, did almost 20%. Now we're closer to 10% because our list has grown outside of like our core audience. But the vast majority of our revenue comes from just subscriptions without putting up a paywall. We also make a couple bucks here and there with advertising. We don't like it. Frankly, like it's just like the only people who want to advertise in the agenda are generally political. We turn down far more advertisements than we take, just because we don't work for candidates. We don't work for political causes. Like we won't run advertisements like that. So that's pretty limited revenue stream. You know, we're contracting with Clean Elections this year to do their debates. So that may or may not break above even. But yeah, it's all subscription revenue. I mean, most of it is subscription revenue. And who reads the agenda? We've got about 20,000 subscribers across Arizona agenda and Tucson agenda, maybe more than that. And you know, I kind of think about it as like core bubbles. It's like I came from the insider capital community. Those people subscribed immediately. You know, I'm like, all right, I've got all 500 of you. That's not going to solve my business problems. And then, you know, people who are kind of tangentially related. And I think like, you know, if we think about like our avatar customer, our core customer, it's a teacher. It's like a person who, you know, politics has some bearing on their life. But they don't do it professionally. That's, I think, a big difference between like what I do with the agenda and what I did at like the Yellow Sheet or the Capital Times is like the lobbyist class struggles with this because they'll hit me up with like, oh my God, did you know so and so something like super insider, like, oh, I cannot get 20,000 people to care about that. You know, I'm sorry, that's no longer my niche. So I try to think about like at one point our tagline was a political insider newsletter for political outsiders. And I think that guides a lot of our thinking is just like people who want to understand politics but find it stupid, frustrating, confusing. That's really our core niche beyond just, you know, kind of the actual political insiders. Is I think of it as like an on-ramp towards civic life.
Okay.
Okay, Sandy, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for enlightening me a little bit more on AI. I don't understand it a whole lot. But my question with AI is, I see what it does for you, and that's great. But I also see people losing jobs and the environmental impact of these data centers. So is it worth it? Do you think it's worth it?
I think about this a lot because I get, you know, especially as like in the last year or so, as data centers have really become like much more of a big controversial thing, especially here in Arizona, is like I get, you know, if I put something like this in the agenda, oh, it's no longer screen sharing, but like the AI image generated stuff, like I still get like you shouldn't use AI, jobs, water, stuff like that, and like on some level, I agree with that. I understand the concerns, at least, I guess. But I think we as a society should be pushing, like, this isn't going away. There's no way to put this genie back in the bottle. Now, what we need to do is be pushing our policymakers to use this, build our regulations around this responsibly. And like that to me is where my responsibility lies, not in not taking advantage of what this can do to help us achieve our mission, but in also making sure that, you know, in my limited capacity as an, you know, an influencer, a person who can influence public opinion, that like I force people to think more deeply about what this technology means and how we should grapple with this as a society. So I think on the individual level, I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use AI in a way that I find responsible to my journalistic values. As a society, we need to be doing that on a much grander scale. There was a federal bill last year that would have outlawed states from enacting any new regulations on AI. You know how scary that is? Congress cannot move. States are actually the ones that are regulating AI in any sort of meaningful way right now. Like we saw the deep fake child porn scandal with Twitter, where Grok, Twitter's AI, was literally making child pornography. Like deep fake, you could upload a person, see them naked, even children. Um, and states started acting, saying Arizona, in fact, started like did stuff to say we can't allow this. The federal government did not. I mean, so we as a society need to be pushing for greater regulations on technology, the tech companies. I think the tech companies are one of the scariest things happening in the world right now. The amount of power that these companies have uh, acquired. I think that like you look at, what were some of the most powerful industries 20 years ago? The media would have been up there. The tech world has swallowed the media. The Capital Times, where I worked before, just got, the Capital Times, I will say, they got bought out by their 300th owner in the last 20 years. And this one is a company called State Affairs. And when they bought it, I was like, oh man, this is a company with vision. This is a company that understands the knowledge that they have by having a team of reporters embedded in the Capitol, the data that they can collect on that, and the ways that they can use that data. And I was, both like heartened because like, God, even if it destroyed the agenda, I would love to have just more competent, news organizations, strong news organizations. And I was really impressed that I had worked at the Cap Times a long time. What I do now is formulated from those years and years of just spending my life inside of that bubble with a lot of that data. They just got a $70 million investment from Peter Thiel. This is a venture back. Yeah. I mean, that is terrifying. I don't know how much you guys know about Peter Thiel, and we write about this a fair amount in the agenda. We wrote a big thing on Monday for the agenda's birthday about how the billionaires are buying the news industry. And these are, I mean, a lot of them are making their money in tech, and the tech industry has integrated itself so thoroughly into Washington and got these ignorant politicians who do not understand what AI is or anything about it to buy into the idea that, AI development comes above all else because if we don't do it, China will do it. There may be some truth to that or whatever, but like these people do not have the knowledge, the critical thinking skills to, represent what I think our interest should be in the regulation of tech. So, on an individual level, I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use it in a way I find responsible for journalism. On a societal level, we need to do something because if just left unregulated, this very well could, and I don't like saying this, but like this could very well end up killing humanity.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
And on that note.
Downer, guys,
Yeah.
sorry.
We're going in there, I promise you.
That's okay.
Are there questions online?
There may be, but he's got to run. He has an appointment at 11, so, well,
Another 10 minutes.
that he needs to prepare.
I have a question.
All right.
So one of my questions is, tell us about your subscription and your t-shirts.
Oh, t-shirts.
Yes, tell us about it.
So you can see oh no, this still isn't sharing. Subscriptions, $120 a year or $12 a month. We also have you really love us, you can pay us $500 a year if you want subscription tier. You can also subscribe for free. And like I said, we have almost never put up a paywall. We may start putting up a paywall in the near future, not on everything, but on a couple days a week, just to remind people that this costs money to produce. You can subscribe at arizonaagenda.com, tucsonagenda.com/subscribe, maybe, or whatever, you'll see the button. What do you want to know?
Well, I think I read yesterday something about getting a t-shirt. I'm not about getting the t-shirt.
If you're a new
That's my
subscriber.
goal.
Yeah.
As a
Yep.
subscriber.
So I had this vision of a Cyclops owl, which was actually in those welcome and exit screens more or less, because I've been using ChatGPT to generate it so many times. I tried to get, I've hit up 4 different local designers and been like, I have this vision of an owl. Can you make some characters for me? They like, I cannot, people are flaky, man. So like this is, why don't you use the local designer for this? Anyway, so yeah, I've been wanting to update our cool eye logo for a long time, and so it's a Cyclops owl. I could explain, but we decided we wanted to put this on T-shirts. We did an edition the other day that was all about like the weird campaign merch that politicians are selling. And we're like, oh, and that gives us an idea, by the way. So we're putting together some agenda owl merch. We're asking for, we set a goal basically if 20 people will upgrade to paid subscriptions in the next, I don't know, week or something, then we'll use the money from their subscriptions to go print all these shirts because it's a little bit of upfront cash. And we'll give the new subscribers a T-shirt, and we will give all of our paid subscribers a T-shirt at cost. So we'll just, figure out how much it costs to print and ship each individual T-shirt, $20, something like that. And then our free subscribers will probably sell for, I don't know, some amount of profit. So yeah, if you subscribe now, you'll get a T-shirt, assuming we make it to that 20 subscriber goal, which I think we will. We're doing pretty good on this.
I think you will too. I have another question too. This is Donna, by the way. If we wanted to research, so recently somebody asked me to help them come up with some research, and since this is being recorded, I'm not going to say names. A politician at the national level, the federal level, to understand the voting record and, just so that we can have conversations with people about and educate them about the differences between maybe policies, politicians, et cetera. So I understand that we could really do that and be successful here with, state politics. How would we go about doing that as being sophisticated in our research at the federal level?
That's an interesting question. The reason that I've never been, there's lots of reasons, but I think that there are a lot of people, everything I just showed you will be free someday. Like the amounts that the bar is getting raised every day, week, month on like what the models can do themselves. And I think that like Congress is a much easier thing because, the entire United States cares about Congress. If you're talking about the Tucson Wickenburg City Council, like the AIs have not absorbed that information yet. Now, I'm not saying like just go prompt GPT about like Congress or whatever. There's a lot of different, go to verifiable sources. Thomas.gov, I think, is still the Congress, a bill lookup. God, I'd have to have like a lot more specific. I could probably walk you through like a decent workflow on this, but without knowing what we're looking for. I would say like, if I were to just say like, okay, I'm trying to compare Juan Ciscomani's voting record to, I don't know, Yasmin's voting record, or like 2 of our Congress people.
Right.
I would probably start with like, okay, on what? And think about like, okay, voting record is too broad. We've got to define that. Voting record on water, on abortion, like what is it? And then just start Googling for the big bills because, like I don't need every single thing for what I'm thinking about right now. And then start like going into the bills themselves, making a list of like, okay, what am I trying to compare? And I don't even know if like AI would factor into this. Honestly, you can see a lot of my work is still just like this, like I start with some variation of like brainstorm. Like actually how I prepared for this was like, hey, I got to talk to these people about AI. Like, what should I do? And it like kicked out some ideas and I was like, no, that's good. But a couple of them stuck in the back of my head. And then I just started like writing down notes and stuff. And then like didn't even return to AI to answer that question. So like early on, I might just be like, hey, AI, what are some of the big abortion bills that, these 2 people or that the US House of Representatives has voted on? It's kind of good for like the shotgun, of like, okay, I'm just getting started. Give me some stuff, and then I will go drill down on that stuff.
Okay.
I don't know if that's helpful at all.
It is, it's not Skywolf at the federal level.
Well, and honestly, I haven't tried this a whole lot, but I wonder if you were just like pretty methodical about like even just using like chat GPT and explain like I want you to go to the official congressional bill website, and like if you can achieve a fair amount by just being somewhat sophisticated about the way you ask. Like I always say I'm an idiot prompter because I just kind of like yell at the machine until it gives me the answers that I want. But I know a lot of people who are, a little bit better at this than me, and they'll kind of like use AI to craft AI prompts. And I'll occasionally do that if I'm doing something like more intense. But like you might even, if you wanted to try, this research with AI, maybe don't ask the question, explain the problem, and ask it to tell you how to ask the question. Like that's one, just kind of like pro tip that I think like goes a long way. But check what it's linking out you got to check this stuff, because it will be wrong. Especially, the less context it has, the more it's just kind of like searching the internet. Like you don't know if it's getting its answers from, congress.gov or Reddit. So,
Right.
like it's good for kind of narrowing things down, but do not print it.
Good example. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much for today. We appreciate
Awesome, guys. This was actually really fun for me. Thanks for letting me rant for 90 minutes on my favorite topics.
You know what? You're a fabulous ranter.
Yeah, you ran well. You ran well.
All off the top of your head. We will watch those clean elections debates. And once again, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Right.
You asked about that, cleanelections.gov. There's a debate schedule page. You can see we're doing the legislative debates, and they've got the whole schedule of congressional statewide. That is a good place to turn to for verified, non-AI information about Arizona stuff. So
Good.
got the whole list.
Right.
All right, thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.